a startup company by a billionaire, a Dutch company, that is proposing that the quickest way to get people, men and women on Mars, is by promising that they'll never return. To give them a one-way ticket, four people. They're accepting applications for four strong-willed people to blast off for an 8-month journey to Mars, where you will land on the red planet, set up a colony, and live there for the rest of your life with 3 other people. The catch is that not only can you not return, but the entire remainder of your life on the red planet will be documented on live TV, is the idea. They want to create like a reality TV series of life on Mars. And they're going to pay for it, this trip, by having you tune in to see how the people on Mars are living. So as they're eating their, self-grown food or drinking their recycled waste of water and potentially not surviving, you're going to watch on live TV and pay for up to 4 people to travel to Mars. Who's up for the journey? Anyone want to go? Yeah. Of course, Josh and Trevor. Do I expect you to say Jody wants to go too. Okay, Jody will go as well. So, if you want to apply, go to mars1.com and submit your application. And apparently there's already some 10,000 people who have applied in the past month that this company has been started up. So, if you're wanting to go to Mars and make history, go for it. I'll stay here on Earth. Following God into His kingdom, fully immersing ourselves into becoming a disciple of Jesus, is in a lot of ways like a one-way ticket to Mars. If we're serious about committing ourselves to God and to His will for our lives and His will for this world, there is no returning to life the life we lived before then. Life will completely and forever change if we are serious about becoming a disciple of Jesus. God will ensure that our lives are never the same again. This morning we're starting a new teaching series out of the book of Joshua that I'm calling Conquerors, a journey into the heart of the kingdom. In this series, we're working through the Old Testament book of Joshua, and we're going to be looking at the story of Israel as they enter into the promised land that God promised them generations prior. If you're not familiar with the history, or maybe you just need a refresher of what has led up to this point in the story of Israel, way back in the beginning, back when God first called Abraham out to start a new nation, God promised Abraham that his descendants would flourish in the area of where Israel is now, west of the Jordan River, in the land of Canaan, as the Bible calls it. This land became known as the Promised Land because for generation after generation after generation, the descendants of Abraham never got a chance to flourish there. Like, with more drama than in a single family than a daytime soap opera, Abraham's descendants, through the line of Jacob, or Isaac and Jacob and Joseph, wound up as slaves in Egypt. Most of us know that part of the story where the Israelites end up as slaves in Egypt, and for 400 years, the Israelites live in Egypt as the slaves of Pharaoh, doing his bidding and living in the life of servitude. All of that culminates into the book of Exodus, when God calls a man named Moses and challenges and commands him to lead the Israelites out of Egypt and back to the Promised Land. The book of Exodus then documents as Moses leads Israel out of Egypt into the desert, and for the next 40 years, wandering through the desert, through the wilderness, wandering, looking for that final day when they would be welcomed into the Promised Land. God would lead them to the land of Canaan. It's during the book of Exodus that we remember that God established a sacrificial system, the law is written, and the Ark of the Covenant is built, the tabernacle is built. So the Israelites are wandering people, wandering through the desert. For 400 years they lived in Egypt. For 40 years now they're wandering aimlessly through the desert sea. Finally, we get to the point in which we catch up to the book of Joshua. Israel, after 400 years in Egypt, after 40 years in the desert, is finally on the eastern shore of the Jordan River. They're on the cusp of entering the Promised Land. They're on the cusp of finally breaking into the land that God promised them hundreds and hundreds of years prior. But then all of a sudden Moses dies. Moses is dead. And God challenges Joshua, Moses' second-hand man, to stand up and lead the Israelites into the promised land. The book of Joshua is a story of Israel finally experiencing the fulfillment of God's promise to Abraham. But it's also a story of the challenges that they face in the process. Going into the promised land, though they might have expected it to be something, just a simple step across the river, and now you're in the land that flows with milk and honey. But there's challenges like the Israelites have never experienced before, waiting for them in the land of Canaan. And though this book, the book of Joshua, is a historical narrative of God's people wandering into the promised land, the story it tells is also analogous of our experience of finding the fulfillment of God's promise as we take intentional steps into His kingdom here and now as well. It's a very strong analogy of what it is like for God's people to walk into God's kingdom today. Like the Israelites, though it might have been a long journey to even get to where we are today, for many of us are really on the shores of the promised land. It isn't until we boldly follow God into the unknown that we actually experience the fulfillment of the promise He's made for us. So let's begin by reading Joshua chapter 1. We're going to read the first 9 verses of the story. And I'll be using the New Living Translation on the screen. The text reads as follows. After the death of Moses, the Lord's servant, the Lord spoke to Joshua, son of Nun, Moses' assistant. He said to Joshua, Moses, my servant, is dead. Therefore the time has come for you to lead these people, the Israelites, across the Jordan River into the land I am giving them. I promise you what I promised Moses. Wherever you set foot, you will be on land I have given you. From the Negev wilderness to the south, to the Lebanon mountains in the north, from the Euphrates in the east and the Mediterranean Sea on the west, including all the land of the Hittites. No one will be able to stand against you as long as you live. For I will be with you as I was with Moses. I will not fail you or abandon you. Be strong and courageous, for you are the one who will lead these people to possess the land I swore to their ancestors I would give them. Be strong and very courageous. Be careful to obey all the instructions Moses gave you. Do not deviate from them, turning either to the right or to the left. Then you will be successful in everything you do. Study this book of instruction continually. Meditate on it day and night, so you will be sure to obey everything written in it. Only then will you prosper and succeed in all you do. This is my command. Be strong and courageous. Do not be afraid or discouraged, for the Lord your God is with you wherever you go. Moses is dead. Moses, the man who God ordained to lead the Israelite people, the man Scripture calls the only one to know God face to face, is dead. The Israelites have been following Moses for 40 some odd years. The Israelites know Moses to be the leader of their people. He is their leader. There is no other leader. And now all of a sudden, Moses is dead. I love how in the passage where God first starts talking to Joshua, he says, the first thing he says to Joshua is, Moses is dead. Joshua would have known Moses is dead. Joshua was Moses' second-hand man. The New Living Translation calls him Moses' assistant, but a better idea would have been this is Moses' war strategist. This is his main advisor. This is the guy that Moses leaned on to help him lead the Israelite people. So Joshua knew Moses very well. They were very close. So Joshua would have known that Moses is dead. But yet God tells him. Because I think sometimes God has to tell us, God has to state the obvious sometimes to us to get us moving forward. Joshua is grieving. He's surely grieving that Moses is gone. He's grieving with the Israelite people. He knows they're lost. They have no leader anymore. And God starts by talking to Joshua by saying, this happened. This is real. This is a fact. Now you either move forward or you fall back. There's no getting Moses back. Moses is dead. And so God challenges Joshua to step up to the plate, take on the mantle of Moses, and lead the Israelite people into the Holy Land, into the Promised Land, into the land of Canaan. Now, we might expect that the Israelites have been wandering through the desert for 40 years. They were trapped in Egypt for 400 years. They're on the shores of the Jordan River, and you would think that this would be a moment of excitement. That all of a sudden, the Israelites were on the brink of entering the kingdom of God. They're on the brink of entering the Promised Land. But yet, what does God say to Moses 3 times in 4 short verses? God says 3 times to Joshua, be strong and courageous. Be strong and courageous. We would think that you don't need to be strong and courageous anymore. You've gotten through everything you need to get through. You've wandered through the desert. You're on the shores of the Promised Land. You're about to enter the land that God had promised you generations ago. Why do we need to be strong and courageous now? Why do we need to worry about anything? We're finally there. We're at the finish line, aren't we? We're about to cross into the Promised Land. The reason God repeats the phrase, be strong and courageous 3 times, is because God never promised. He promised the people that He would give them this land. But God never promised that the fulfillment of that promise would come easy. God never assured the Israelites that the fulfillment of His promise into the Promised Land, into the land of Canaan, would come easy. The Israelites are about to begin the most overwhelming, the most frightening period in all of their history today. Some of the Israelites, in fact, are going to want to run back into the desert and hide in the barren desert rather than face the challenges they're about to endure in the Promised Land, in the land of Canaan. Things are about to get very real, very fast for the Israelites. The Israelites are going to come up against people living in the land that God had promised them, who vastly outnumber them, who seem immensely larger than them. They're going to come up against people who have every single advantage on their side. And so the Israelite people are going to be afraid. Joshua himself is going to be afraid. He's going to be tempted with fear. So Moses commands them, do not fear. Be strong and courageous. Stick with what I taught you through Moses, to what is in this book, and I will be with you all the way. Life is about to get incredibly frightening and tough, but the Lord of the universe, Yahweh Himself, is with you. Be strong and courageous. Somehow, American Christianity, Western Christianity, has convinced itself that the life of a Christian is supposed to be easy. Somehow along the lines we've convinced ourselves that if we accept Jesus, if we go into God's kingdom, if we seek His promises for our lives, that we're going to have an easy, comfortable, nice, posh life that will be free of challenges for anyone to see. Everyone's going to be one of us because we're with God. And with God, that means we've got everything. And with everything, we've got a life of ease and comfort. A lot of Christians believe this. A lot of Christians believe that life is supposed to be easy. I believe this is the greatest trick Satan has up his sleeve. Satan does not want us to be a disciple of Jesus. Satan does not want us to come close to God, so he tells us if life is hard, if life is difficult, then it must not be that you're following God close enough. Or you must be far away from God, and you should seek the easy life. Satan wants us to only believe that we are a disciple of Jesus, when in fact, we're nothing but, we're further than Him than we've ever been. C.S. Lewis plays with this idea in his famous book, The Screwtape Letters. The Screwtape Letters is a series of letters that C.S. Lewis records from a veteran demon to his apprentice. From Screwtape, the veteran demon, to his apprentice, Wormwood. And in one of the letters, Screwtape writes this. He says, if you can get a man to the point of thinking that religion is all very well and good up to a certain point, you can feel quite happy about his soul. A moderated religion is as good for us as no religion at all. And more amusing, in fact. A moderated religion is as good for us as no religion at all. And more amusing, in fact. Satan wants us to believe that all we really need in life is a mediocre connection with Jesus. Satan wants us to believe that as long as we're standing on the shores of the Promised Land, as long as we're looking at the kingdom go any further. Satan wants us to believe that as long as we attend church and do a few good deeds here and there, that we've got everything we need so that in eternity we'll be with him in heaven. We'll be with God in heaven. What if we were to compare this understanding of the Christian life with what Jesus describes the Christian life to be like in Matthew chapter 5? Jesus says this in Matthew 5, verses 21 through 23. You have heard that our ancestors were told you must not murder. If you commit murder, you are subject to judgment. But I say, if you are even angry with someone, you are subject to judgment. If you call someone an idiot, you are in danger of being brought before the court. And if you curse someone, you are in danger of the fires of hell. In verse 27 to 29, Jesus says this, you have heard the commandment that says, you must not commit adultery. But I say, anyone who even looks at a woman with lust has already committed adultery with her in his heart. So if your eye, even your good eye, causes you to lust, gouge it out and throw it away. It is better for you to lose one part of your body than for the whole body to be thrown into hell. And then later on in verses 43 through 45, Jesus adds, he says, you've also heard that the law says, love your neighbor and hate your enemy. But I say, love your enemies. Pray for those who persecute you. In that way you'll be acting as the true children of your Father in heaven. The life of a disciple, the life of one who is pursuing the kingdom, is anything but comfortable and easy. The life of a disciple, in fact, could be analogous with a life of war. Only it's what Paul calls a war against the evil rulers and authorities of the unseen world, against mighty powers in this dark world, against evil spirits in the heavenly places. To live a life as a disciple means to experience a life change in us that causes us to go to war with the forces of this world. We fight against the forces of anger and lust and vengeance, alongside the bearer of love and peace and justice. The stakes are incredibly high if we choose to cross the river into the promised land. It's a lot of work to journey into the kingdom and confront both the internal and external forces that would want to keep us from a life-giving relationship with God. The burden is great as we're called to bear our cross through a world that refuses to embrace the cross. The price of true discipleship, the price of becoming like Jesus, of pursuing Christ-likeness, will cost you your life as you know it. And as Bonhoeffer famously put it, when Christ calls a man, he bids him come and die. When Christ calls a man, he bids him come and die. The invitation to cross the river into the promised land is free. But the price of fully embracing the kingdom in this world is far greater than anything we could ever pay for ourselves, pay otherwise. Yet nothing is more fulfilling. If we're strong and courageous, if we're willing to go against the grain by following Jesus into the river and crossing into his kingdom, and never looking back to the life that we once had, we can change the world. We can change the world. Many of you likely remember the tragic shooting that took place back in 2006, I believe it was, in an Amish schoolhouse in Lancaster. Many of you might remember the story about it was a milkman of the town who had been harboring resentment and a lot of pain and anger over the death of his daughter who died 20 minutes after birth. Fostered this anger and this resentment for 9 months until he finally snapped and decided that he was going to make God pay for what he had to go through by the death of his child, by innocently shooting up a schoolhouse and killing 5 children and injuring 5 others. Many of you remember this story because it was all over the news. It was local for us, but it was national, mid-national headlines, international headlines even. This is the kind of tragedy that demands justice. It demands vengeance. This is the kind of tragedy that the whole nation was glued to their TVs looking for who was going to pay the price for what had happened in Lancaster. But before the national news network shut down, before their cameras went off to the next tragedy, to share the next tragedy with the world, the families of the children who were killed in Lancaster, PA, decided to do something incredibly strong and courageous. Within hours of the shooting, The Amish families were heard reassuring one another of the principles that drive them so deeply. A grandfather of one of the murdered children was noted as saying, "We must not think evil of this man. This man had a mother. He had a wife. He had a soul." The world watched in astonishment as an unbelievable forgiveness took place that day. Members of the community showed up at the doorstep of the shooter's widow to offer condolences and comfort for her loss. One Amish man was known to have comforted the killer's sobbing father for over an hour, just holding him, while this man sobbed over the choices that his son had made. The Amish families set up a charity for the shooter's family and fully included them in the healing process. About 30 Amish people even showed up at the milkman's funeral to demonstrate their unconditional love for this man. Marie Roberts, who was the widow of the shooter, she wrote a letter to the families of this Amish neighborhood. And she attempted to articulate her thoughts by writing the following. She said, "Your love for our family has helped to provide the healing we so desperately needed. The gifts you have given have touched our hearts in no way words can describe. Your compassion has reached beyond our family. Your compassion has even reached beyond our community. Your compassion is changing the world. And for this, we sincerely thank you." We have the power to change the world we live in by entering into the kingdom, by pursuing Jesus, by being like Jesus. We have an open invitation to cross the river into the kingdom of eternal love and peace, compassion, and mercy. But pursuing it is anything but easy. We have to go to war against the temptations of our hearts. We have to go to war against every fiber in our being that wants to seek justice and vengeance and anger and rage. We have to fight against forces like lust and gluttony and pride. We have to go to war against the ways of this world, against the powers of this world, in order to become more like Jesus and experience His kingdom in its entirety. We need to decide to be strong and courageous in order to boldly walk into God's eternal promise. There will be giants, there will be walls, there will be incredible battles to be fought, but God will be with us the entire way if we pursue His kingdom first before all else. I encourage you this morning as we begin this series of talks through the book of Joshua to be strong and courageous. Don't look back and be satisfied with the status quo of your life before you do God. Don't be satisfied with the ways of this world. Pursue His kingdom. Pursue His discipleship. Pursue to be like Jesus. Be strong and courageous, and He will be with you.